Imagine standing on the walls of Vienna in the dark summer of 1683, the ground beneath your feet trembling not from thunder, but from thousands of Ottoman cannons pounding day and night, the air thick with smoke, fear, and the certainty that if the city falls, all of Central Europe may follow. Before we go any further, if you want deep cinematic history stories like this that feel more like a movie than a lesson, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel right now, because what you're about to hear is not just a battle story, it's the moment history almost turned in a completely different direction. The Ottoman Empire had come farther than any Muslim power before it into the heart of Europe, and by the summer of 1683, Vienna was the final lock on the door to the west. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha believed that once this city fell, the road to Rome, Paris, and beyond would be open, and his confidence was not arrogance without reason, because the Ottoman army surrounding Vienna was massive, disciplined, and terrifyingly experienced, made up of janissaries who had broken the walls of Constantinople, elite cavalry, engineers who specialized in siege warfare, and an empire that for centuries had been on the winning side of history. Inside Vienna, the situation was desperate, food was running out, disease was spreading, and every day Ottoman sappers dug closer under the walls, planting explosives that could bring entire sections crashing down, while the defenders, outnumbered, exhausted, and cut off, knew that relief had to come soon or the city would die, and with it perhaps the balance of power in Europe forever. What makes this moment so haunting is that for weeks, it truly looked like the Ottomans were going to win. Their artillery battered the fortifications, their mines exploded beneath bastions, and their banners flew confidently across the hills, signaling not just an army, but a civilization convinced of its destiny. Yet history does not always turn on numbers or experience alone, because hidden beyond the forests and hills north of Vienna was a force assembling that would introduce a secret weapon, not a single object, but a devastating combination of tactics, technology, and timing that the Ottomans neither fully understood nor were prepared to face. And when it finally struck, it did not just defeat an army, it shattered a myth of unstoppable expansion that had lasted for centuries. As the siege dragged on, Christian Europe, long divided by politics and religion, did something rare. It united, and at the center of this coalition was the Polish King John III Sobieski, a commander whose reputation for aggressive cavalry warfare bordered on legendary. Sobieski did not come with just soldiers, he came with an idea of war that directly countered Ottoman doctrine, and the Ottomans, confident behind their siege lines and focused on the walls of Vienna, failed to recognize that the battlefield itself was about to be transformed into a killing ground, perfectly suited for their enemy's most devastating weapon. On September 12, 1683, as dawn broke over the Kahlenberg Heights, the relief army launched its attack, and while infantry clashes and artillery exchanges raged across the valleys, the true secret weapon waited patiently on the slopes, hidden by terrain, discipline, and perfect coordination, building psychological pressure on an Ottoman army that suddenly realized it was no longer the hunter, but the hunted. This weapon was not new in a technical sense, but in scale, execution, and timing, it became something history had never seen before. The massed charge of the Polish Winged Hussars, supported by Allied cavalry and infantry, unleashed at the exact moment when the Ottomans were stretched thin, disorganized by the need to fight on multiple fronts, and unprepared for a shock assault of such magnitude. When Sobieski gave the order, thousands of heavily armored cavalrymen thundered downhill, lances leveled, wings clattering behind them, creating a visual and auditory terror that no Ottoman formation on that terrain could effectively stop. And in that instant, the psychological advantage that had belonged to the Ottomans for generations shattered like glass. The charge did not simply break lines, it collapsed morale, command structure, and the entire logic of the siege, because the Ottomans had planned for walls, mines, and infantry engagements, not for a catastrophic cavalry strike descending from the hills with unstoppable momentum. And as units began to flee, panic spread faster than any messenger could contain it. Kara Mustafa Pasha, who had delayed assaults to preserve Vienna as a trophy rather than a ruin, now faced the consequences of hesitation, as his army, once confident and dominant, disintegrated under pressure from a weapon designed to exploit exactly that moment of vulnerability. And the retreat that followed was not a tactical withdrawal but a rout, leaving behind tents, artillery, supplies, and the dream of Ottoman supremacy in Central Europe. What happened at Vienna was not just a battle lost. It was the moment the Ottomans learned that their traditional methods of warfare, so successful for centuries, were now vulnerable to new combinations of mobility, coordination, and psychological shock. And that realization would echo through every future conflict they fought in Europe. The secret weapon, therefore, was not only the Winged Hussars themselves, but the strategic unity that brought them there, the intelligence that timed their strike, the terrain that amplified their power, and the leadership that understood when to unleash decisive force rather than seek slow attrition. In the aftermath of the battle, Europe celebrated Vienna as a miracle, a city saved at the last possible moment, but from a historical perspective, it was also the beginning of the end of Ottoman expansion westward, because once the myth of invincibility was broken, every rival power began to see the empire not as an unstoppable tide, but as a giant that could bleed, retreat, and ultimately be pushed back. The Holy League formed soon after, launching counter-offensives that would reclaim Hungary and beyond, turning what had once been Ottoman territory into contested ground, and each victory traced its psychological roots back to that day outside Vienna, when the secret weapon proved that the empire could be defeated decisively in open battle. Even within the Ottoman world, the defeat had consequences, as Kara Mustafa Pasha was executed for failure, signaling a recognition that something fundamental had gone wrong. Yet the deeper problem was not one man's leadership, but an entire system slow to adapt to changing realities of warfare. The Battle of Vienna stands as a reminder that history often pivots not on gradual decline, but on sudden moments where preparation meets opportunity, and those who fail to recognize new forms of power pay the price in a single catastrophic day. When we look back now, centuries later, it is tempting to reduce the story to a dramatic cavalry charge, but doing so misses the deeper truth. The secret weapon that crushed the Ottoman army was the fusion of innovation, unity, and decisive action at a moment when complacency had taken root on the other side. It was the understanding that wars are not won only by numbers or tradition, but by the ability to read the battlefield, the enemy's mindset, and the precise second when overwhelming force can turn fear into panic and confidence into collapse. Vienna 1683 was not just the end of a siege, it was the turning point of an era, the line where Ottoman expansion stopped and European resistance began to advance, and it all happened because one side adapted faster than the other, unleashing a weapon that struck not just bodies, but the very belief that the Ottomans could never be defeated.